Oh yeah, it's already blessed.
Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. Today I'm talking about the cards that I consider to be the most auto-include card for the class. In case you don't know, auto-include in this game, or well in most card games, basically means that if you're playing this class, chances are this card will 100% be in your deck if you have it. Before we actually get into the cards, I wanna discuss some of the reasons why these cards are usually auto-include. The most common ones include the cost. Usually auto-include cards are cheap, which means they're usually not win conditions. They can help your win condition by distracting your opponent and by forcing them to make plays against it or something similar, but they're usually not the win condition. They're just simple cheap cards that will require your opponent to deal with them. Usually they have average or semi-decent stats. You usually don't run an auto-include card just because it has good stats. Usually the reason why you want it is because of a variety of reasons. Not only that it has good stats, but still they usually have average stats. And finally, the most obvious reason for a card to be auto-include is that it fits a variety of decks, no matter what other things you're running. For example, in Guardian decks, you could be playing Not decks or something Control, but no matter what deck you're playing, if you're playing Guardian, you're putting this card, for example. Speaking of, let's go into the classes, and the first one,
Guardian.
Okay, so for Guardian, the top pick for the most auto-include card was obviously Triceratops. This is not even a competition. It's a 2-cost card that will not charge your opponent's block meter. It's a 1/3, which are decent stats for 2-cost. Well, not that incredible, but the fact that it has an effect where it grows simply by existing, and you can make that grow faster by drawing cards or conjuring stuff, just makes it useful in absolutely any deck. You could be playing again with any other deck like Mechanolith, Knots, Control, or whatever. You were probably still running this simply because it just does not get in the way of your deck. It will usually always get this value, at least it will trade with something. And most of the time it will take your opponent a couple of cards to remove it instead of just being a 1-for-1. Some honorable mentions are Galactic Cactus, since it's again a cheap bullseye that even if removed will deal a little bit of damage, and most importantly will almost never trade negatively with anything. And Forget-Me-Nots, since making zombie tricks more expensive is always useful, plus the stats are fairly decent.
Kabloom.
Now for Kabloom, there were not that many options, so I don't even have honorable mentions, but obviously the winner of the most auto-include card for this class is Berry Blast. It's just a very simple trick, but a very good one. Costs 2, which is fairly cheap, and deals 3 damage to absolutely any zombie or zombie hero. It's fantastic since you can use it to remove basically most 1 or 2 drops, even some 3 drops. You can combo it with other removal options to make a 2-for-1 on something that is dangerous, and since the damage is 3, which is actually pretty high, you can usually finish the game with just a couple of these. If your opponent doesn't have any block, 2 of these to face will do 6 damage, which is more than 25% of your opponent's HP, so if you get them low enough, you can straight up use this as a wing finisher thingy.
Mega GGW.
Now for Mega Grow, this one was a hard one to decide. Even here in my notes I mentioned that. Mostly because this class has a lot of cheap little options that are fairly decent. The 2 top options for this one that I had to decide between were Click Piece or Black Eyed Peas. Both are cheap, will usually grow a lot. Click Piece energizes with itself since it gives you more Click Piece and they all grow and they get out of control. So even if you're running anything else, they will usually get value. While Black Eyed Pea, you can just chuck it on the board. It has pretty decent stats, and if your opponent plays absolutely any trick, it will grow, which means just by them playing a single trick, it will be a 3-4. Any more tricks they play, it will grow even bigger. For me, I think between the 2, Black Eyed Pea... never mind, I changed my mind while recording. I think Click Peas are better. Also, I didn't mention it, but Bananasaurus was also considered, since it's a very good standalone card, but it's a little bit too expensive. I still put it in most of my Mega Grow decks, but you can probably have a different win condition at that point, I don't know, Repeat Moss if you're doing a deck which costs the same amount and can actually finish games fairly quickly if you're playing I don't know, Captain Combustible. So yeah, a lot of options for Mega Grow, but yeah.
Smarty.
For Smarty, there was only one real option for me, which is Lima Pleurodon. It's a 2/2, which are okay stats for a 1-cost. And you just chuck it in the water. It can stop, some annoying amphibious minions, mostly Toxic Waste Imp, for an equal trade. Plus, it will give you free Magic Beanstalk, which is a broken card. Of course, it can shuffle at the bottom of the deck, so it might be absolutely useless, that effect. But again, it only costs 1. And if you get lucky and start with a bunch of them, you will not lose any value playing this basically, which is what makes it auto-include in my opinion.
Solar.
For Solar, I chose Ketchup Mechanic. This was between Ketchup Mechanic or Little Buddy in my opinion, since they are the cheap options for Solar. You could consider also Ice Spore, but I don't really like it that much. But yeah, between those two, I think Ketchup Mechanic is the best, since as long as your opponent has a couple of minions, this will just get insane value even in the late game. So if you're playing against a Swarm deck, this is automatically great since, let's say you played on 4 zombies, since a lot of zombie decks don't actually use the amphibious lane. You would heal by 4 by playing this, and you would get 3 cost 5/5. So that's pretty insane stats plus a free heal, which is what makes it pretty good, I think. Little body, it's only here really because it costs 0, so you can combo it with a lot of stuff, but I don't actually put it in every single deck, so I don't think it's an auto-include, to be honest. But yeah, again, you can feel free to disagree. But now let's move on to the zombies.
Beastly, ay ay ay.
Okay, so for Beastly, there were a lot of options for the best auto-include card, but of course, we all know there's only one that truly wins, and of course, that is
Zombot.
Nah, just kidding, we all know it's Cheese Cutter. The other real honorable mentions are Cyborg Zombie, since it's another cheap card that even if removed, it will give you another, like, okay zombie. And Bounty Hunter, since it usually always gets value, but Cheese Cutter is just insane, man. It costs only 1, has okay stats being a 2/2. And if you ignore it, or your opponent ignores it, it will give you free cards, which then you can just keep defending it or playing more of them, and your opponent will have to, because otherwise you're gonna have a billion cards by turn 3.
Brainy.
For Brainy, same thing, I didn't even add honorable mentions for this one. Everyone knows that for Brainy you always run Teleport. It only costs 1, and it will draw you a card if you play it, so you will never lose value. Well, you pay 1 sun for it, but like it doesn't really matter, doesn't count. You play, and you get the ability to teleport any zombie in, which can stop a card, can be a win condition, can do basically anything, so rarely there is a reason not to not play this. You can even just run 4 of them just to play them and make your deck like 36 cards basically.
Crazy!
For Crazy, again, it's a trick. This one was like a close one between the 2 tricks, but I chose Bungee Plumber as the winner. The other honorable mention was Exploding Fruitcake. Both of these are here for the same reason. They are very, very cheap removal, which Bungee Plumber being a 1 cost that just deals a little bit of damage, and Fruitcake being a 2 cost that does a lot of damage, although only to plants, and gives your opponent a card. I consider Bungee Plumber to be a bit more auto-include, only because it has that same versatility as Berry Blast. It's just a little bit worse since it does less damage and it's on zombies instead of plants, so you could play it last instead of Berry Blast being like played second. Whereas Exploring Fruitcake is also kind of auto-include, but I think it's just a little bit less since you might not get value of it in certain decks if you're doing something different, like if Crazy is like a secondary class to whatever you're doing. Like for example, if you're playing something like Grapes with Pirates, then it might not be that useful because you're kind of just rushing instead of just controlling in an aggro way. I don't know how to explain it, but I think Bungee Plumber is usually more useful as an auto-include card, not in general, because Exploring Fruitcake is just broken, man.
Hachi.
For Hardy, the clear winner is obviously going viral. It's just not that cheap trick, it costs 3, but what it does is just crazy. Like it gives absolutely every zombie you have 1/1/1 and Frenzy, and it also draws you a card so you don't lose a card for playing it. It just costs 3 brains basically, and it gives just insane value to your board. An honorable mention was Black Hole, simply because you can also just put it into basically any deck where you don't really want to have an environment, but you kinda need something to deal with them, and there you go, it's a cheap environment, it will get you a little bit of value.
Sniraki.
Finally, for Sneaky, I had trouble deciding like what card is auto-include in this deck, mostly because the class has like decent cards, but I don't know if there's any that I would like absolutely always add to my deck. Like for example, Spacetime is nice, but I only really consider playing it in Conjure decks. Pogo and Mog are solid again, but I don't add them to anything either. Space Cowboy is very OP, but I don't always play it. So in this, for Sneak I picked Imposter as a winner because it serves kind of a similar purpose to Cheese Cutter. Like it doesn't always have to be removed, but when it is removed, at least you get something out of it. And that would be the end of the video. You can disagree or agree with some of the options you have. Maybe you consider one of the honorable mentions to be like a lot better than the option I actually picked, but if you have anything you disagree with, you can leave a comment, and thanks for watching.
You should add Zombot to this deck.